Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and George W. Bush is talking. I know. I'm not feeling it either, but I think it's important to go into the story because it's kind of funny coming from the guy who obviously it's been contested that he was one of the most violent warmongering politicians in recent U.S. history because obviously Obama came after him and dropped more bombs than him. But nonetheless, George Bush, the warmongering neocon of the Bush dynasty, is talking about how the Middle East doesn't want peace, and that it's somehow not in their national interest to support a peaceful Middle East. I think he's projecting here, honestly, and I'm going to go into this article because it's kind of hilarious. As this Zero Hedge article says, peace expert George W. Bush says isolationism is dangerous to peace. Now, first of all, he's a mass murdering psychopath who has destroyed countless countries and has led to millions of deaths, though I think he was just a puppet at the top. I mean, he's too stupid to actually put through policies, right? But anyway, the point is he is just a puppet, but isolationism is an interesting word because I think there's a difference between non-interventionism and isolationism, as Dr. Ron Paul once pointed out. Calling anti-war people or libertarians isolationists is like calling your neighbor a hermit for not breaking your windows. I mean, it's absurd. I would even add for not breaking your windows and breaking into your house and then slaughtering you and saying it's for the peace of their kitchen in their house next door. I think it's just so absurd. And this idea of isolationism would better be described as North Korea, kind of, not allowed in or out unless you have certain permissions, etc. That's isolationism. You're isolated from the rest of the world. China is pretty isolationist when it comes to media, for example, as we saw recently. Anyway, let's get into this article from Zero Hedge. As it says, humanity was treated to an important lecture on peace at a recent event for the NIR School of the Heart by none other than Ellen DeGeneres' BFF and world-renowned peace expert, George W. Bush. And I quote, "I don't think the Iranians believe a peaceful Middle East is in their national interest," said the former president, according to the Washington Post's Josh Rogan, whose brief Twitter thread on the subject appears to be the only record of Bush's speech anywhere online. I do have to note that Iran is, I'm never going to say that Iran's a peaceful country and that they're all good people, because I don't think there's evidence to suggest that. I think that it's quite obvious that Iran's government, like any other government, is an organized crime syndicate. That goes with literally any government in the world. They're organized crime syndicates, and I certainly don't think that Iran's government is all about peace, but I think the people are. People on the ground, for the most part, want peace because they don't want bombs flying on their head and for their country to be pushed into the Stone Age, because Iran's actually a really nice, developed country. And I was recently in Turkey, in the southern border of Turkey by Syria, by the Syrian border, and it's just such a beautiful region, and everything you're told in mainstream media in the U.S. is such a lie, an absolute lie. It's a beautiful area, and the infrastructure is actually better than the United States, though a lot of that has to do with crazy central planning and stealing people's money and plundering to try and prop up the economy artificially by building roads. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Let's get into this article a little bit further. As it says, and I quote, "An isolationist United States is destabilizing around the world," Bush said during the speech, in what, according to Rogan, was a shot at the sitting president. And I quote, "We are becoming isolationist, and that's dangerous for the sake of peace." Well, it's the idea of bombing yourself into a peaceful world is like, peaceful eventually once you kill off all humans with all these bombs, and it'll be pretty quiet. But it's only a select few people that are control freak psychopaths that can completely alter the world's environment by just bombing and killing everyone. Funny how government's the biggest polluter and then comes in and wants your money to solve the problem it created in the first place. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But the point is, this notion of going to war with countries, arming and funding terrorist groups and rebels, and staging proxy wars and doing false flags in order to create peace is like saying, oh, I'm a fireman, and I think the best way to put out fires is to start fires and then we show up at the scene and we'll shoot the kerosene out of our hoses at the fire. Surely that will create a fire-free environment. Yeah, not so much. It's going to cause a lot worse of an environment, and we see that in foreign policy worldwide. The military-industrial complex is the biggest form of government. It's always blown my mind to see conservatives support the military-industrial complex, considering it's literally globalism, it's literally internationalism, it's literally the biggest form of government you could have as the government goes into deficit spending and prints vast amount of currency to throw at these huge, weapons manufacturers and to throw at these contractors around the world. And obviously at the U.S. military to mass murder people. Anyway, every veteran I know of that was in Iraq witnessed mass murder and witnessed the torture of men, women, and children. And last time I checked, that's probably not a great way to spread peace. Anyway, carrying on, it says, for those who don't speak fluent neoconservative, isolationist here means taking even one small step in any direction other than continued military expansionism into every square inch of planet Earth. And we are becoming isolationists here means we have hundreds of military bases circling the globe. Our annual military budget is steadily climbing towards the $1 trillion mark, and we are engaged in countless undeclared wars and regime change interventions all around the world. Anyway, as it continues here, in this article, it says, it is unclear why Bush is choosing to present himself as a more peaceful president than Trump, given that by this point in his first term, Bush had launched not one, but two full-scale ground invasion wars whose effects continue to ravage the Middle East to this very day, especially given the way both presidents appear to be in furious agreement on foreign policy matters like Iran. But here we are. From a certain point of view, it's hard to say which is stranger. A war criminal with blood-soaked legacy of mass murder, torture, and military expansionism, telling Trump that he is endangering peace with his isolationism, or B, the claim that Trump is an isolationist at all. So I do want to break away for a second and note that we can't forget that while it's great that Trump pulled out of Syria, and it's great that he pulled out of all these places, and it's so wrong how suddenly the left is supporting war like they did under Obama as well, but not under Bush. Just suddenly when Obama got in, the left went back to being pro-war. But the thing is, what we're being distracted from, which the media is not really going into much, is the fact that Trump is sending troops to Saudi Arabia to aggress against Iran. And when John Bolton was booted out about a month ago, when Mnuchin and Pompeo were asked what was going to happen next with Iran, and if that meant that everyone was going to be better with Iran, less aggressive with Iran, Pompeo said, no, we're going to be harder on Iran than ever before. And we've already seen evidence of that and obvious attempts at false flags, like the attack on a ship in the Gulf of Oman not that long ago. And it's interesting because the captain of that ship and the company involved in that ship, the Japanese company, said, no, that wasn't Iran. There's no evidence that that was Iran. And anyway, I mean, narratives will be narratives. Can't forget the 7-country plan and the attempt to completely destabilize and destroy the Middle East, because that creates a constant problem. So when I hear George W. Bush say that it isn't in their national interest in Iran for a peaceful Middle East, I think he's projecting, because I think it's not in the U.S.'s national interest for there to be a peaceful Middle East. Because if they stop bombing and exploding that region, it creates less divide and less reason for the U.S. to come in and take over. And then it creates less problems where, for example, I'll go back. I got to explain this in the best way possible. Hitler was propped up by the U.S. government against the Communist Party. The USSR was helped and the U.S. allied with the USSR in order to overthrow Hitler. And now the U.S. armed and funded the Mujahideen, later Al-Qaeda, against the USSR. And then, of course, the U.S. armed and funded all these other rebels in the region, armed and funded the Ba'athist Party in Iraq, created all these problems, and then they come in as a solution. Even FDR helped prop up Ho Chi Minh, which led to the Vietnam War. And, I mean, we could go on and on and on. They create the enemies and they come in as a solution. Well, what happens then? Well, again, you have the left and the right, which are very, very much identitarians in a lot of respects. So you just have these two sides clashing with each other, and it's great to keep them divided because it keeps them distracted from the real enemies, the government and the central banks that are enslaving humanity. So what they do then is they arm and fund all these groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, which met in the White House with Reagan and all that kind of stuff, and they're still trying to negotiate with him and all the time. Anyway, the point is they arm and fund these groups while bombing men, women, and children, and then angering the population, and then they end up taking up arms. They get more and more extreme. They're impoverished. Their first world infrastructure turns into third world infrastructure. It's sad. Everyone starves. Diseases spread, and then refugees are created, and they go to other places, and then the governments in many cases ship in only hand-selected refugees and put them into the heart of populations that are very different from them, causing divide. So on one side, people are ultra tolerant, and on the other side, people are ultra intolerant, and they always expect the government to manipulate this issue one way or another, let in or don't let in, that kind of stuff, and that just creates more control in the hands of the state, especially when it comes to property rights, because property rights should be individualistic, not government run, which is communistic. When government owns all the land, it essentially means that if it owns all the land, all the people on that land is owned by the people that own the land. So therefore, you as individuals are actual collective cattles, flocks or herds of cattle that are being marched to the slaughter and divided. So people are attacking each other. Refugees are welcome. Refugees aren't welcome. And the government's smiling all the way through, thinking, look at the problem and the reaction and the solution we've created. And we're the solution to the problem we created, creating more problems down the line. And that's how it works in a nutshell. So that is what I see coming out of this. And I believe that Iran is one of the last major places to completely destroy and take over entirely. Again, Iran's government isn't good, but the people on the ground are. And to do this to these people is absolutely horrible. And it's kind of genocidal. And what I believe is going to come of it is it's going to completely destabilize that area and create more terrorism and create more problems. So that just leads one thing into another, one thing into another. It just constantly creates problem, reaction, solution, repeat, which is a Hegelian dialectic. So that is what I believe is happening with that. And so it's not in the national interest of the United States to support a peaceful Middle East, period, and stop. Anyway, I want to get further into this article. As it says, as we've discussed previously, Trump's so-called isolationism has thus far consisted of killing tens of thousands of Venezuelans with starvation sanctions in an attempt to effect regime change in the most oil-rich nation on earth, advancing a regime change operation in Iran via starvation sanctions, CIA covert ops, and reckless military escalations, continuing to facilitate the Saudi-led slaughter in Yemen, and to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, inflating the already insanely bloated U.S. military budget to enable more worldwide military expansionism, greatly increasing the number of bombs dropped per day from the previous administration, killing record numbers of civilians in airstrikes, for which he has reduced military accountability, and of course advancing many, many new Cold War escalations against the nuclear superpower, Russia. And yeah, Trump gave the CIA a big open door in the Middle East about a year ago. As it continues, it says, but these bogus warnings about a dangerous, non-existent threat of isolationism are nothing new for Dubya. In his farewell address to the nation, Bush said the following, and I quote, "In the face of threats from abroad, it can be tempted to seek comfort by turning inward, but we must reject isolationism and its companion, protectionism." And is our children's learning, or whatever he said. Anyway, carrying on. He says, retreating behind our borders would only invite a danger. In the 21st century, security and prosperity at home depend on the expansion of liberty abroad. If America does not lead the cause of freedom, that cause will not be led. The cause of freedom by stealing everyone's money in trillions of dollars, printing vast amounts of currency, destroying the price of living, and then going and blowing up babies. That's freedom to you, George W. Bush. That is freedom. You know, if I said what I actually thought here on YouTube, my channel would just be taken down. It's sickening. It truly disgusts me right to the core. As it continues, it says, as we discussed recently, use of the pro-war buzzword isolationism has been reemerging from its post-Bush hibernation as a popular one-word debunk of any opposition to continued U.S. military expansionism in all directions, and it is deceitful in at least three distinct ways. Firstly, the way it is used consistently conflates isolationism with non-interventionism, which are two wildly different things. Secondly, none of the mainstream political figures who are consistently tarred with isolationist pejorative are isolationists by any stretch of the imagination, or even proper non-interventionists. They all support many interventionist positions, which actual non-interventionists object to. Thirdly, calling someone who opposes endless warmongering an isolationist makes as much sense as calling someone who opposes rape a man-hating prude. Opposing an intrinsically evil act is not the same as withdrawing from the world. I do want to note that I don't actually think that Venezuela was all Trump or all the U.S. government. It was a mixture of sanctions and a terrible centrally planned socialist society with vast central planning, bans on everything, and the government completely ignoring individuals who are impoverished on the streets and starving while pushing ridiculous laws to further control the public and, again, drive them against each other. As the article carries on to say, nobody actually believes that U.S. foreign policy is under any threat of anything remotely resembling isolationism. The real purpose of this buzzword is to normalize the forever war and drag the Overton window so far in the direction of ghoulish hawkishness that the opposite of war is no longer peace, but isolationism. By pulling this neat little trick, the propagandists of the political media class have successfully made endless war seem like perfectly normal thing to happen, and any small attempts to scale it back look weird and freakish when the truth is the exact opposite. War is weird, freakish, and horrific, and peace is, of course, normal. This is the only healthy way to see things. Peace is what happens when government doesn't try and interfere in literally everything. If government doesn't see themselves as a criminal organization that's allowed to use force against other people because they wrote some ink on paper, that is one of the biggest problems we face today. Is government and banks, a combination of wealth and power. And that wealth isn't in the hands of just rich people. It's in the hands of the people who create the currency. I wish more people were rich, and I wish more people were successful and actually strive for success instead of becoming more and more dependent slaves like most of the masses are, because it's easier that way. When you grow up in a school system where it's it's a public school system, you're raised by the government, you see them more than your parents throughout your childhood statistically, and therefore you grow up seeing that entity as mommy and daddy, and therefore once you get out of school, you continuously look to be dependent on some entity, that being government or something surrounding government, some part of government, a faction of government. You constantly look for that, like there cannot be any other way other than this politician or that politician. And it's been going on since ancient Greece. Change every single time. And what happens? They change the face, but the entity stays the same. And so when are people going to realize that maybe it's the structure, the governance in the first place that's a problem, not the person who represents it on an international stage? That's my thoughts anyway. Anyway, I wish George Bush would go back to painting weird pictures and writing weird books about, I don't even remember what didn't he write a book about a dog or something? I don't know. Just, the guy is an idiot. And he reminds me of Justin Trudeau in Canada in a lot of ways, because there's no way that guy ever wrote a policy in his life. The guy's like ridiculously stupid. Anyway, I thought I had heard enough of George W. Bush at this point, and that the next time I'd hear from George W. Bush, who's, by the way, best friends with Michelle Obama, her partner in crime, according to her, because they all work for the same people, guys. I thought, the next time I'd hear from George W. Bush, it would be him admitting finally that he has a serious form of dementia, and that's why he just sits around painting weird Bob Ross paintings 24/7. Anyway, we will continuously cover whatever comes next with foreign policy. YouTube does not favor foreign policy stories, so this video is definitely demonetized, and we're not allowed to talk about it. So when it's demonetized, it's shadow banned dramatically, and it only reaches 10% of the average audience it otherwise would. So we need your help more than ever, folks. So make sure, if we want to beat this information war and avoid different, actual on-the-ground wars in the future, which I do believe independent media has a really great ability to in this day and age avert. I think it comes down to you guys helping out any way you can. Just $1 a month or more makes a huge difference. And of course, my responsibility is to get out of this problem of shadow banning, where we've lost 80% of our audience since January and 90% of our monetization since January. But with that said, in the meantime, while I develop new tactics, it comes down to you guys to help us out any way you can. So we really appreciate anything you could do for us. So if you can help us out and look at those links below, it means a great deal to us. And make sure to check out the outro video right after I sign out. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at Wham, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely, extremely appreciated, as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes, $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we can defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a patron. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale. So make sure to find us on float.app. That's flote.app. At Josh Sigurdson, as well as at Wham, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on BitChute at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are 2 major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WHAM, that's W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.